Hi guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about this game I had in the FOSC tourney. My first round game was against F-Press, and I hope you said your name right. I don't really know how to say it, but that's my best guess. So we're going to talk a little bit about the game and how it went. I didn't know what to expect. I believe he said he picked 1,000 for his pre-tournament rating and said that he used to play a lot but only plays now and then. So, I mean, that could mean anything. I kind of didn't expect a lot based on the 1,000. But, again, I just don't really know going into the game. So I was going to play it pretty safe, and it's a good idea to do that anyway, is to play the board and not the person. But if you're against a weak person, sometimes you're tempted to try something cheap. So I didn't want to try to do any of that. I wanted to just play straight ahead. So I just opened up with E4, which is pretty normal for me. Sometimes I'll play C4. I almost never. I can't remember the last time I played D4 except for a flip. I meant to play E4 and played D4, but that's the only time I've played it recently. I just don't like D4. It's just kind of boring. And I don't really agree too much with its opening principle. I like to get the bishop and queen. I like to open lines for my pieces early, and it seems like this line only opens one line here for the bishop, but it does not open anything here. You're obviously not going to do anything with the king, and maybe it opens it up to attack. So I don't really like it. I can't say the same thing about C4, because sometimes I do like to play C4, but I like to play that for different reasons altogether. So I opened up E4, and he played C5, which is called the Sicilian defense. It is a pretty standard defense against D4. It's counterattacking. What I like to do against it is play C3. This is not a very common second move, not played as often as some of the other early moves for white, but I like this one just because it makes sense to me to prepare D4 for my next move. So as long as I understand what's going on in the position, I'm not too worried about whether grandmasters draw with one line a little bit more often than they do with another one. I'm concerned with understanding what's going on, and that's why I like C3. C3 has the negative that now I can't play my knight to C3. It's blocked in. So that's a little bit concerning, and you usually have to deal with that. But a lot of times, this isn't what happened in the game. I'm just going to play these moves. A lot of times, what winds up happening is these pieces come off anyway, and then the knight can just go to C3 normally. So that's not what happened here. Play knight F6 for black's second move. I was surprised to see this move. I don't really like the Sicilian much as black, so I don't know that side of it very well. I don't play against the Sicilian that often either, even though it's one of the more common responses to E5. I actually don't see it that often, and I definitely don't see this move very often. I had to really try to think what the best move against it was. I could not remember any lines. It seemed vaguely like E5 was probably right, playing this move here, but I wasn't positive of that. I went ahead and played it because it seemed natural to me. It seemed like that was what I should do. I'll eventually play D4 here. We might trade off pawns, whatever, but I'll have this little thing here, and it's sort of like the advanced French at that point. So I went ahead and played E5. He responded with this, which I think is natural, and I think that's probably the best place, maybe the only place to put it other than just putting it back on G8, which would be terrible, obviously. So he played it to he played knight D5. I played bishop C4. I did look this up afterwards. I didn't look it up at the time, of course. I don't use any kind of assistance during games. I think some places allow that in correspondence games. I don't care whether they're allowed or not. I'm playing myself. I don't ever use any assistance or any helps. I looked this up afterwards, and there are a few times that this was played, and it seems okay. This is not a very common position in the opening at all, but it seems okay. It seems to me like the best thing for black here is to go ahead and move the knight away to B6, which also attacks the bishop, and then for the bishop to come back to B3. So something like this. And now you've got a nice diagonal here for your bishop, and it can always come back to c2 if necessary from the c-pawn advancing and attacking it. You can just come back to c2, and then you've got another nice diagonal. Oh, sorry about that, my email. I need to turn that off. It's Domino's Pizza. Great. Yeah, so sorry about that. I'll turn that off. That's my email sound. So, where were we? We're going to revert. This isn't the position. Okay, reverting back here. Next move, he moves knight b6, which I think is normal. And I move my bishop back to e2, which I thought was pretty bad. I undid any of the developing I did with tempo. My last move, I attacked that knight with my bishop c4, which what I'm doing is I'm getting my piece out and doing it with initiative. He has to respond to that threat. Well, he responded to that threat by attacking my piece right back. And so I just retreated. Basically what it did was it wasted a move on my part. This was probably not nearly as good as bishop b3 would have been. Would have been a lot better spot. This is a sort of a natural spot for a bishop to be anyway, in front of the king. Two wide diagonals here. But I think bishop b3 would have been a lot better with the possibility of coming back to c2. Knight c6, pretty natural developing here. And as I said, we're preparing d4 to take control of the center. Those pieces almost always come off pretty quickly with the c3 hanging out there. Here's e6, which I think is pretty natural. He's opening a line for his bishop, taking a little bit of control of the center. Natural developing move to help support d4. And here we come to a fairly significant decision. This isn't that big a deal, but I think it's a place where I could have performed a little bit better. Couple of possibilities here. Number one, knight c3 blocks the check. Number two, bishop d2 blocks the check. Now, there are other possible moves like this, which is pretty terrible, kind of undevelops that knight. There's this, which isn't bad, but it blocks in the bishop. So there's a few things here that are clearly discardable moves, in my view. What I actually played was knight c3, but I should have played, I think, bishop b4. I think this was my first pretty big mistake. Bishop d2 offers to trade his good bishop, and I'll explain what a good bishop is here in just a second, for my bad bishop. And, you know, he's either going to have to do that or he's wasted this move and he'll just back up, kind of like I did with my e2 bishop. He's come out and attacked, and now I've kind of counterattacked or blocked and counterattacked, and he has to retreat, and it just basically wastes the move. It gives up the initiative. So if I were to do this, it's almost like, okay, in order to remain, in order to capitalize on his move, he has to take that. Now what this is going to do, say he does this, and I just do that. What he's done is he's gotten rid of his dark square bishop. And if you look at his dark square bishop and his light square bishop and compare how mobile they are, the center pawns, and if he were, imagine he had a pawn on d5 here, and most of his pawns are fixed on these light squares if we had that. And that means in the center anyway, and sometimes on the wings too, his light squares are all clogged up, meaning that bishop right there doesn't have a lot of mobility. That's what we mean when we say that's a bad bishop. Compare that to the dark square bishop where he can move around freely. Look at this big long open diagonal, or here. Just a lot easier to move around and attack my center pawn with the dark square bishop. His light square bishop can't get out, and even if it does, it can't attack these center pawns. So, this is a bad bishop. He's traded his good bishop for my bad bishop. My dark square bishop is my bad bishop. These two center pawns mean it doesn't have nearly the mobility that this light square bishop has. So what I've done is I've gotten him to trade off his his good bishop for my bad bishop. And that's what I should have done. But unfortunately, that's not what I did. It's one more move. And then what I actually did was knight c3, which I feel is a pretty significant mistake. It's not crippling, but it's a place where I could have definitely improved my position, and